and to reset the main event of UFC 294, Alexander Volkanovski, and on 10 days' notice, replacing Charles Oliveira to take on Islam Makhachev. And in their first fight, it was a battle for pound supremacy. Well, Volkanovski, off of that loss, was able to go out and finish the interim champ, Yair Rodriguez, down at featherweight. He takes this fight on short notice. We couldn't be more amped about it. As always, one half of your host duo, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram, at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, respective socials. Sean Livingston? Jonathan Kuminga? Is it a role player for the...
I have a big hot take that if Jonathan Kuminga played on like another team that was rebuilding, he'd put up monster numbers. It's just the Golden State's so good, they don't really need him right now.
Well, we'll see how it works, Matt. I'm wearing a Charlie Hewlett game-worn practice jersey, so it's crazy stuff. But here for the underdogs, and Matt this weekend, Volkanovski in that underdog role once more. And when we look at this fight, and we look at the first one, again, a lot of buzz around it. The odds in the original matchup, Volkanovski plus 310, Makhachev minus 380. And going back and watching that fight this afternoon, I had an idea in my mind of how the fight went. But on the rewatch, I scored it rounds 1, 3, and 4 for Makhachev. And then I had round 2 and round 5 for Volkanovski. And I thought, okay, knockdown near the end, Volkanovski. That was the only credited knockdown in the entire fight. Now, there were knockdowns pretty well on both sides in the first round. In the second round, there was a knockdown. Both guys hurt each other throughout that fight. It's just, to me, when in the first fight, Volkanovski was able to pressure forward in the blitzes, he was able to land some of the shots to the body, he was able to negate some of the takedowns out of Makhachev. He had a lot of success, and it wasn't just with straight shots, it was with the looping shots as well, and he was able to catch Makhachev on those half beats and pull away. But for me, I know, again, a lot of people seem to think that the judging was fairly controversial.
It was a close fight.
2 of 3 judges gave round 3 to Volkanovski. To Makhachev. I scored it for Volkanovski. I might have my scoring all over the place. I'm going to read through this while I hand it off to you. But regardless, I had it 3 rounds to 2 for Makhachev. But again, a 49-46 seems silly. But
it's one of those fights where I can't
fight.
argue with you if you had Volkanovski. Personally, I thought Makhachev won 48-47. But again, if you had Volkanovski, I could sit here and listen to your argument because it was that close of a contest. Upon multiple rewatches, I've scored it for both guys, so I get where both people are coming from. I have a hard time with this, though, because the thing about Volkanovski is, I know we get tagged by some big shots on the feet, but I still believe he's the more technical striker between these two. He throws the more varied shots, he's able to get in and out of the pocket a lot faster. It's just every now and then Makhachev was able to land one of those big hooks, and listen, Makhachev doesn't have the most refined striking, but it is pretty effective, and with the threat of his wrestling, it does accentuate it that much more. It is very similar to what Khabib benefited from near the end of his career. Remember how good his striking looked against Justin Gaethje? A lot of that came from the fact that Justin Gaethje was terrified of the takedown attempt coming. So I do think Makhachev benefits a lot from the fact that his grappling is so dominant. But it was impressive to see Volkanovski not only hang with Makhachev in the grappling, but defend the takedown attempts, because for being the smaller guy, and Makhachev's a big 155er, right? Like, Volkanovski's short for his division, but I don't think he's a small featherweight, right? Like, he's very stocky, very strong for the division. He's a small 155er, and the fact that he was able to hang and defend some of those takedowns and scramble with Makhachev, I found to be extremely impressive. Like, I truly think Volkanovski's probably one of the top 5 for 5 just strongest pound-for-pound fighters in the UFC, because that's his ability to scramble with Makhachev. But I don't know if on short notice he's going to have the ability to do it for as long as he was able to continue it in that first fight.
And that was the big talking point of the commentary team throughout the first fight that was back at UFC 284 was both these guys have insane cardio. Both these guys can push a pace through 5 rounds. Dominic Cruz's kind of final thing that he said in the 5th round, he says, his cardio is a huge weapon, non-stop, about Alexander Volkanovski. You saw the big right hand that landed the knockdown in the 5th round.
It was wild.
Against Makhachev. And my point from earlier was, in the 3rd round, I thought that Makhachev won. 2 of the 3 judges gave that to Volkanovski. So I did have my rounds right, but that was just the one thing that I wanted to add in there. The scoring was all over the place, but it was a really close fight the first time. Now again, Volkanovski taking this fight on less than 2 weeks' notice. And if you look at it, I mean, his last time out, he had a fight camp at 2 gyms. Gym in Australia with Joe Lopez. He also had one big-time Eugene Behrman in his corner, but it didn't seem like there was a lot going on with City Kickboxing from camp-wise, because Volkanovski spent most of it at Bangtan Muay Thai in Thailand with the Hickman brothers. So I'll be interested to see what Volkanovski is able to kind of pull out of his bag of tricks in this one, because he's a guy, even coming off the couch, I'm not worried about the cardio. This is a guy that is an absolute, for lack of a better word, a machine. And so when you look at
Craig?
When you look at this fight, Matt, again, I was kind of surprised. You know, you saw them, stare down with one another, face off, I guess is the word that you could use. You saw them both in the cage. It didn't look like there was a giant size discrepancy there for Volkanovski to Makhachev. Volkanovski looked big in that fight. He really did.
He did, but I still think Makhachev barely makes 155. There was conversations he was going to have to move up to 170 for a long time in his career. So, not that Volkanovski's a small guy, just with the height coming into 155, he would look out of place if he fought like Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. Michael Chandler probably looks him in the eye, but you get the idea. I like this fight, but I brought this up to a friend of mine the other day, my buddy Tim, who's a big MMA fan. It sucks that we are getting it on short notice, right? Because, Makhachev's going to beat most guys at 155, I think. To be fair, I think Oliveira was going to have a really good opportunity. I was probably going to pick Makhachev, to be completely honest and transparent, but Charles Oliveira can beat anybody in the world. But for Volkanovski, I didn't think anybody at 145 was going to beat him, especially nobody currently. I guess Topuria has a chance, but personally I would have sided with Volkanovski. Point being, these guys would have met eventually on full camps, and I think that would have given us the best version of this fight. Whereas with the short notice for Volkanovski, he might just not have the same 10 out of 10 cardio. I agree with you. I don't worry about him coming off the couch in terms of, hey, he's just going to fall off a cliff after the second round. But these guys fought at a wild pace in that first fight where they're always doing something. There's always striking, getting hit, having some kind of a grappling exchange, and I just don't know if Volkanovski's going to be able to hold up to the same level in this fight.
Both of these men undefeated in Abu Dhabi. For Alexander Volkanovski, it was the second fight against Max Holloway, split decision win there. Obviously, both those first two fights are really close. As it went on, not as close.
Not at all.
Volkanovski pulled away. Makhachev 3-0. He has wins over Davi Hamosh. People might forget that one, an old-timey name.
That was supposed to be a close fight.
Dan Hooker and Charles Oliveira when Makhachev won the belt. So again, the odds in this one, Makhachev favored. Different price in the original fight. It is less so than it was in the original matchup.
Which, of course.
We threw it out there to you guys in the YouTube community tab. A lot of people showed up here. 2,500 total votes. You can check it. YouTube community tab. It's easy to find. 61% Volkanovski. In the comments, David McIntosh saying, let's go, Alex. This is your time. Maceo is saying, I believe in Alex. Let's go. Marsh Marley saying, ain't no way people think Volk's got this on short notice.
Okay, this is my theory about this fight. It reminds me a lot of Jack Della Maddalena's last fight where he won. But, I guess it was the fight before last where he won, but it was closer than people thought it was going to be, so in their minds, they want to judge it even closer. Volkanovski was completely counted out their first fight. Nobody thought that fight was going to be close whatsoever. Makhachev was running through everybody, just destroyed Charles Oliveira, who was a pound-for-pound great, probably going to be a Hall of Famer off the run Oliveira had. So for Makhachev, I think the fact that the fight was closer than people initially thought it was going to be does help Volkanovski so much. And maybe he is going to go out there. There's no reason for me to believe he can't win this fight based on what I saw in their first matchup. That's how close the fight was. I just think the fact that he's getting this much shorter to get ready for it is going to be a detriment to him.
Yeah, and it will be interesting. Makhachev getting ready for a fight against Oliveira, getting ready to kind of acclimatize himself to Abu Dhabi. And then you look at the fact that Volkanovski, in their original fight, the blitzes work for him. The hooks work for him. Again, second round, big-time hook. Fifth round, big-time hook, and he's able to drop Makhachev. And again, uncredited knockdowns, you just have to watch the fight, I guess. But for Volkanovski, a lot of people are going to kind of hold him in the high regard, not just because both these two guys are Hall of Famers, but because Volkanovski's win to cap off International Fight Week against Yair Rodriguez, where he's able to hit him with that big shot. It rocks Rodriguez back. Then he lands the knees. Then Rodriguez is down. And then it's just ground and pound from there. Volkanovski is an all-time fighter. And when he came into the UFC, I thought, he's fighting Mizuto Hirota? He's fighting Junior Bacon Cheeseburger,
He'd
Jeremy
be
Kennedy?
Ricky Henderson or Mike Schmidt. He'd have 100 WAR in baseball terms.
It's wild. So, Matt, I do have Islam Makhachev in the rematch. Both of us going with Makhachev in this fight. But there are some big-time fights on this card. I know there's some that are kind of going to fly under the radar. Bantamweight's the hotness right now. We know that. But you look at the fights between Javid Basharat, Victor Henry. You look at the fight between Nathaniel Wood and Mohamed Naimov. A couple of ones that are down on the prelims. They're not going to get the shine of a main card. But I know, we're away from the Apex now. We can get amped for these fights, and we're really looking forward to it.
I think it's a really fun pay-per-view card ahead of us, to be honest. Again, I mentioned it in the opening. The UFC does a pretty good job of throwing these fights together on short notice. You wouldn't assume they get one of the best welterweights of all time to jump in on short notice to fight one of the scarier fighters, really, in the UFC. And then on the other side, everybody was excited for that Oliveira rematch. more people are probably excited for the Volkanovski rematch, so these are great fights.
Well, some big-time fights. You know, Question Mark Kicks is 2 hours before the prelims on Saturday. Make sure you tune in for that. The home stretch of the year, and we're tied on the pick tally, so some big moves in the making. Coming up to end this year, Matt. Some big-time fights this weekend. Make sure you check them out. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.